I wish that it becomes a federation. It will have problems, but I hope that the Greek and Turkish Cypriots learned their lessons from the history that if they have problems, they are not going to kill one another because of their problems. And similar to Belgium, they will have some issues and problems, but the country is not going to be flushed down the toilet. It continues. You live with your problems, but you continue talking to one another to solve your problems, just like the Belgians do, just like the Flemish and the Walloons do in Belgium. All right? So, I mean, if there is a federation in Cyprus, my point is this. Next day, the Greek and Turkish Cypriots are not going to start kissing and hugging one another. Similar to Belgium, we will have problems. It will be a difficultly run federation. But the point is that we should not use violence to solve our problems. That the country continues. Right? The state machinery continues. Suppose 1 or 3 or 5 years after the establishment of a federation in Cyprus, there is a possibility that the two communities might say, you know what, this is too redundant, this is too expensive. We don't particularly love one another, so let's get divorced. In that scenario, I call it Czechoslovakianization of Cyprus. Why I use the term Czechoslovakianization of Cyprus? Because to indicate that the divorce will be, well, every divorce I think has problems, but the divorce would be smooth. The divorce would be bloodless, let me put it that way. Just like the Czechs and the Slovaks separated. I'm not so sure whether it was a wise idea, but nonetheless, they were civilized enough to get divorced without anybody being killed. Alright? And of course, under the EU umbrella, Czech and Slovak republics are in a way united too. Not as one country, but on a different level, they are united still. Right? This is scenario number 1 that I envisage. The second scenario for Cyprus is, in case Greek Cypriots reject another plan in the future, similar to 2004. If that happens, then I anticipate 3 dynamics to kick in. Dynamic number 1 is what I coined the term Taiwanization of North Cyprus. What I meant by it was North Cyprus will normalize its relations with the rest of the world without formal recognition. But similar to Taiwan, it has a lot of commercial, cultural, and whatnot relations with the rest of the world. Similar to you have direct flights from Taipei City to many parts of the world. North Cyprus will have similar relations. That's dynamic number 1. By the way, the Taiwanization of the TRNC, North Cyprus had already started actually. When the Turkish Cypriots supported the UN peace plan in 2004. In the last 9 years, the amount of relations of North Cyprus with the rest of the world has increased. And that's what I call Taiwanization, meaning normalization with the rest of the world, normalization of relations without formal recognition. But you have other types of relationships. Students coming from all different countries is a good example, like yourselves. The second dynamic, I call it Kosovoization of North Cyprus. And this is basically what I meant here is, similar to Kosovo, some countries recognize Kosovo and some countries do not recognize Kosovo. I think currently it's like 91 or 93, it's changing. 90-something countries recognize Kosovo, and 90 or 100 countries do not. In European Union, until recently when Croatia joined, before Croatia joining, there were 27 countries. 5 EU countries do not recognize Kosovo, but 22 countries of EU recognize Kosovo. I think it is Spain, Greek Cypriots, Cyprus, Greece, Romania, and Slovakia, who do not recognize Kosovo. But the rest, everybody in the EU recognize Kosovo. So this is what I anticipate in case in the future Greek Cypriots reject another peace plan. And finally, the last dynamic I call is Hatayization of North Cyprus. Hatay is a province of Turkey, which joined Turkey in 1939 after a plebiscite from Syria. It is on the Syrian border where things are happening nowadays. So what I call Hatayization of North Cyprus is that with more and more immigration from Turkey, North Cyprus becomes more Anatolianized, that's why I call Hatayization. It becomes more and more dependent on Turkey. It becomes more and more like a Turkish province rather than an independent country. So in case Greek Cypriots rejects a future solution, this is what I envisage as my second scenario. All right? And there is my third scenario. I call it the dark scenario. I think that it is theoretically possible, but I don't think that this scenario is likely to happen. But this is the case when if Turkey cuts all its relations with the European Union and says, you know, I don't want to be a member of the European Union, full stop. Which would mean, again, I coin the terms, Turkey becomes more and more Middle Easternized and more Islamized. All right? In that scenario, of course, restrictions and isolations of Turkish Cypriots continue, even get worse and worse. As I said, this is a scenario which is theoretically possible, but I don't think that it is a likely scenario. I don't think that Turkey will ever be cut off from some sort of linkage with Europe. It has already been in Europe in many different respects. It's a part of NATO. It has been a acceding country to EU. It's a member of Council of Europe and da-da-da-da. So it is in the mostly security architecture of Europe. So these are my scenarios. I'm going to stop here, and if you have any questions, I'll be very happy to answer.
In the second scenario, you said that 5 EU countries do not recognize Kosovo.
Yes.
One of them was Slovakia. Isn't it really ironic for them that they themselves became a separate state and now they're not supporting another separate state?
They have their own, I think, issues with some minority problems. So they don't want to. Romania is the same thing. They have their, I think, gypsy community, or they don't want to sort of encourage separatist movements in their own country. So each of these countries have their own problems that they don't want Kosovo to become a precedent, an example. Right? Was everything so clear? Really? Yeah. Well,
southern side speak Greek
yes.
and the northern side speak Turkish. If the two sides united, what's the solution of the rivalry conflict?
That's a good question. That was the case also in 1960. The state would have two official languages. If there is a federation, the official languages of the state will be Greek and Turkish. That means that if you go to a federal institution, meaning any institution related to the central government, as a citizen you have the right to be addressed by your own mother tongue or your preferred language. So you will be finding either if you are Greek, you know, there will be somebody addressing you in Greek, no problem. But when it comes to communication between the actual people, I think that in the old generations, there are a lot of Turkish Cypriots who know Greek. There are some Greek Cypriots who know a bit Turkish. But I think that learning the language of the other will be definitely encouraged. But meanwhile, there will be another language which will be the language of communication, which is already the language when we, for example, communicate. It is English. For example, when I've shown you the public opinion poll results of the Cyprus 2015 group. In this group, we have Greek and Turkish Cypriots working in the last 4 or 5 years, and we communicate in English. That's the sort of language, communication language. So, meanwhile, the language will be some sort of English, because if you are educated, the level of English is good. If you are not educated, people still communicate, but it is, you know, we make a joke, it is like a Tarzanian English. It's like, you know, how much? Now you'll find a way to communicate, but when it comes to, of course, more deeper stuff, you need, of course, some language skills to communicate.
Why did you?
Go on.
I presume that you are familiar with the situation in the Bosnian Federation. So my question is, why do you think that your solution would function better than that?
I don't presume that it's going to function better than, let's say, Bosnia, but I've been to Bosnia 3 times. Last week, actually, I've met 2 people from Bosnia in a conference on Syria, and I've chat about the situation there. The Bosnian case is still fresh compared to Cyprus. You know? In Srebrenica was a couple of days ago, the anniversary, and it's been about 10 years, right? Or even less than 10 years. I'm sorry. It was a conflict in the last 2 decades, or the problems of the 90s, basically. Comparatively, it is still fresh. I mean, the generations who suffered are still alive. In Cyprus, for example, you know, since the 50s, it's been 60-something years. Since the 60s, it's been 50-something years. And since the 74, the last event, it's been almost 40 years. Some of the old generations are gone. Now we have young people on both sides of the island who do not really know one another, who have brought up by some stereotyped information and whatnot, but personally they have not suffered. So, for example, we have now, in the last 9 years, people can cross on both sides. People cross. They don't mix much. I mean, majority of Turkish Cypriots cross to the other side for shopping. It's the European part. Cheaper ones and whatnot, without any tax, customs union. And majority of Greek Cypriots cross to this side to come to our gambling casinos and nightclubs and whatnot. But they don't mix. But the good thing is that they don't also kill one another. That's the good thing. There is a level of civility. There is a level of civility in Cyprus. Of course, there is no guarantee that it's going to work better than the Bosnian case. But I think in the Bosnian case, I don't know yet. I don't know detailed enough to make a judgment, but I think that heavy international intervention was required. It was a blessing to stop the bloodshed at one point in Bosnia, but now it became a curse. Because what Bosnia has now as a government structure is pretty much relied or dependent on international involvement, right? The country is ruled by, who is the person who is in the, who's sitting in the top, the high, what is the name?
It's the presidency of all the nations.
I mean, the international involvement is still very intense. Hopefully in Cyprus it's not going to be the same. It will be, by and large, two communities sharing power. My only hope that they have learned their lessons in the past, and that we start with a loose federation. Loose federation in the sense that the two wings, or the two federated states, one Greek Cypriot and one Turkish Cypriot, will continue having majority of the functions or the competences of the state, and there will be only a few functions of the state that will be given to the central government, and hopefully it will be smoother than what went in Bosnia. But I do sympathize. I mean, my first time in Bosnia was in 2001, and then I was there a couple of more times, both in Mostar and Sarajevo and Kornic. After seeing the situation there, it's like when I came to Cyprus, I said, we have nothing. I mean, compared to what Bosnia had to go through, Cyprus problem is a piece of cake, I would say. Definitely. So my sympathy is all with people in Bosnia, definitely. I think there was another question there, yeah?
In case that scenario, the last one happened,
In case what?
in case that scenario happened, what would be the consequences for both parts of the island?
But I couldn't get your question. In case?
The third scenario you proposed, the dark one, in case that Turkey and EU relations go into the problem, what would be the consequences for both parts of the island?
As I said, the third scenario is the least likely scenario. I mean, personally, I don't expect that scenario to ever happen. But theoretically, it is possible. Even if, let's say, one government of Turkey for a time, it decides that, okay, I'm going to cut my relations with the EU. Well, I mean, you cannot cut your relations in one night. You might stop the accession negotiations, but Turkey is in many other ways very much connected to the European Union, because if you look at the trade relations, Turkey is selling whatever percentage of its products to the EU, and it is importing whatever percentage. You cannot cut those things in one night. The only thing you cut is the accession talks, which is in the last 8 years almost going with a snail pace. You know? So I don't envisage that scenario to happen. But in case it happens, what will happen is, basically for that time that Turkey will be cut off, it will be pushed more towards other regions. It could be much more drawn to Middle East. But I don't think that particularly the Turkish leaders now especially would be interested into being drawn into Middle East. You know what is happening in Syria? You know what is happening in Egypt nowadays? And those are not really the places that you want to be, right? So, there was a question from that part? Yeah.
Are group Cyprus 2015.
Huh.
Do you have some expectations for
Right.
this year?
Well, when we established this group, the idea came in 2007. But then we put the team together and then we were looking for funding. And finally we found funding from UNDP. So this is a program which was supported by UN Development Program, UNDP in Cyprus. At that time, we thought about finding a name that has some attraction, that has some sexiness, let me put it that way. And I was the father of that name. My intention was to come up with a name that will show that we are future-oriented, not looking at Cyprus problem with a very very past focus. We didn't want to be drawn into historical events. We want to show that we are future-oriented. But that future, I thought about it in a date, 2015. And at that time it was a date of several years, future-oriented, but not too far future. A future where it is possible within the next several years to see the fruits of the results of our things that we have been doing. So for example, the public opinion polls that I have shown you, these public opinion polls were cited by Ban Ki-moon. You know who Ban Ki-moon is? Yeah. The Secretary General of the UN. He cites our results in his report to Security Council. We know that our results that are shown you are used and sometimes abused by the two leaders in Cyprus. We know that our results are used in the negotiation table when the two sides negotiate. So I think that that also gave us some pride as this Cyprus 2015 team that what we have been producing are making an impact. So the idea was to choose a date, to choose a name that will have a future-oriented aspect, but not too distant future, a future far away, but it's also reachable, all right? That we can envisage. You know? That was the idea. Yes?
The Cyprus issue started in 1974 and the EMU was founded in 1979. It was kind of a quick decision, according to the tendency. So I was wondering, the establishment of this university can be helpful to solve this problem?
I don't know, I mean, as I mentioned at the very beginning of my lecture today, Cyprus problem did not really start in 74. It has, it dates back to other dates in the past. But nonetheless, the Turkish Cypriots, they were obliged to live their own life while you attempt to solve the Cyprus problem, but until the problem is resolved, you have to live, right? I mean, you cannot just freeze everything and focus on solving the Cyprus problem. So meanwhile, they needed institutions like universities, hospitals, and whatnot, and those things were established. This university was established first in 1979, not as a university, but as a technological institute, higher technological institute, and in 1986 it became a university. It's been almost how many years? Since 86? 37 years. All right? It managed to attract students from 70 different countries. For example, in my department, we have 350 students. 1/10 is Turkish Cypriots.